Have you ever noticed something strange? A woman can meet a man who is closer to her age, more socially acceptable, easier to explain to her friends, and yet her attention keeps drifting somewhere else. Toward the man she wasn't supposed to notice. Toward the man who makes her pause for a second longer than she intended. Toward you. And before you dismiss that thought, before you immediately start listing all the reasons why it couldn't possibly be true, I want you to sit with something uncomfortable. What if the biggest obstacle between you and her isn't the age difference? What if it's the fact that you've already convinced yourself she couldn't want you? If that question hits a nerve, stay with me. And if you've ever felt invisible in a world obsessed with youth, subscribe. Not because subscriptions matter, because some conversations only make sense when you're ready to hear truths most people never say out loud. Now, I need to tell you something that many men misunderstand. When a woman becomes genuinely interested in a man significantly older than she is, it rarely begins the way people imagine. It isn't usually about age, and it certainly isn't about numbers. Women don't experience attraction as a mathematical equation. They experience it emotionally, psychologically, sometimes even unconsciously. I've sat across from enough women to know this. Women who would never publicly admit what drew them toward a certain man. Women who tried to talk themselves out of their feelings. Women who felt embarrassed by what they wanted. Not because the man was wrong for them, but because what they felt didn't fit the story they thought they were supposed to live. And here's where it gets interesting. Many men believe attraction begins when a woman notices their appearance. Sometimes it does. But often what captures her attention first is something much harder to describe. A presence, a feeling, a kind of emotional gravity. You know that rare experience when someone enters a room and somehow seems completely unaffected by the noise around them. They're not performing confidence, they're not demanding attention, they're simply comfortable in their own skin. That quality affects people more deeply than most realize, especially women. Because underneath all the social expectations, all the dating advice, all the endless conversations about preferences, people are still searching for emotional safety. And emotional safety doesn't always look young. Sometimes it looks experienced, steady, grounded. A man who has survived enough disappointment that he no longer needs constant validation. A man who isn't desperately trying to prove himself every 5 minutes. The irony is that many older men never see the moment when a woman begins noticing them. Because they're looking for obvious signals. They expect attraction to announce itself. It rarely does. Instead, it arrives quietly, a longer glance, an unexpected curiosity, a question she didn't really need to ask, an unusual interest in your opinions. And because you've already decided she's out of reach, you explain it away. You tell yourself she's just being polite, just friendly, just nice. So you miss what might actually be happening. Not because you're unaware, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing you could still be chosen. That's the part nobody talks about. The real age gap isn't always between you and her. Sometimes it's between who you are now and the man you still think you are. The man carrying old assumptions, old rejections, old stories. The man who quietly decided his time had already passed. And women can feel that story, even when you never say a word. Because attraction isn't only about what she sees, it's about what she feels when she's standing near you. And if you've spent years convincing yourself you're no longer the kind of man a woman could deeply desire, that belief starts leaking into everything. Your posture, your voice, your eye contact, your energy. The saddest part? Many men lose opportunities not because women reject them, but because they reject themselves first. And what I'm about to tell you next may make you rethink every interaction you've had with a younger woman who seemed strangely drawn to you. Because sometimes, long before a man realizes what's happening, she's already made a decision inside her own mind. The decision I'm talking about isn't dramatic. There isn't a trumpet sound in her head. There isn't some movie scene where she suddenly realizes she's in love. Real life is much quieter than that, and far more confusing. What often happens is that a woman starts paying attention to a man for reasons she can't fully explain to herself. At first, she barely notices it. She just finds herself remembering something he said, thinking about a conversation longer than she normally would, comparing other men to him without meaning to. And that comparison is where things become interesting. Because most attraction doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through contrast. A woman might spend months around men who are attractive on paper, men her age, men who check every expected box, men who say the right things, wear the right clothes, know exactly how to create the right image. And yet, something feels missing. Not wrong, just missing. Then she meets a man who isn't trying so hard, a man who doesn't seem desperate to impress anyone, a man whose self-worth isn't hanging by a thread. And suddenly she's experiencing a feeling she hasn't felt in a long time: relief. Most people don't think of attraction that way, but they should, because emotional relief is powerful. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for years. Eventually, you stop noticing the weight, until one day you set it down. That's when you realize how exhausted you've been. Sometimes a younger woman feels something similar around a mature man. Not because he's perfect, not because he's wealthy, not because he's older, but because being around him feels emotionally lighter. There's less performance, less competition, less confusion. She doesn't feel like she's participating in a game. She feels like she's interacting with a real human being. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many men completely underestimate how attractive emotional steadiness can be, especially in a culture that constantly rewards noise. Think about it. How many people today are genuinely present? How many people actually listen? How many people can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it? Not many. That's why maturity often creates a kind of magnetism that has nothing to do with appearance. It's difficult to explain, but women feel it. The problem is that when men notice a younger woman showing interest, fear often arrives before confidence. Not excitement, fear. Because the age difference immediately activates every insecurity they've buried. What will people think? Why would she choose me? Am I imagining this? What's her real motive? Notice what happens. The focus shifts away from her behavior and toward your anxiety. And anxiety is a terrible interpreter of reality. It turns curiosity into suspicion, interest into doubt, possibility into self-sabotage. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. A woman leans closer emotionally. The man becomes more distant. She becomes more open. He becomes more guarded. She offers opportunities for connection. He talks himself out of seeing them. Not because he lacks intelligence, because he lacks permission. Permission to believe he can still matter. Permission to believe he can still be desired. Permission to believe his story isn't already over. And that's heartbreaking, because while he's busy arguing with reality, she's often having her own internal struggle. People forget that women question themselves too. A younger woman who feels drawn toward an older man doesn't automatically feel confident about it. Sometimes she's confused. Sometimes she's resistant. Sometimes she spends weeks trying to rationalize feelings that don't fit her expectations. She wonders what her friends would think, what her family would think, whether she's making sense of her own emotions correctly. The attraction doesn't always arrive with certainty. Sometimes it arrives with conflict. And conflict is important, because when someone continues moving toward a connection despite their own doubts, that usually means the feeling has depth. Not fantasy, depth. Which brings us to something most men never realize. By the time you start noticing signs, she's often been thinking about you much longer than you've been thinking about her. Long enough to observe, long enough to compare, long enough to imagine possibilities, long enough to decide whether your character matches the feeling she's experiencing. And that's why the next mistake becomes so costly. Because once a woman reaches that point, she's no longer evaluating your age. She's evaluating something far more important: whether the man she senses beneath the surface is actually the man standing in front of her. This is where things become surprisingly fragile, because attraction can survive uncertainty, it can survive distance, it can even survive an age gap that looks intimidating on paper. But there's one thing it struggles to survive: incongruence. The moment a woman senses that the man she's been quietly admiring isn't the same man he believes himself to be, something shifts. And I don't mean deception, I mean something much more common. A man who appears strong but secretly sees himself as inadequate. A man who seems calm but is constantly fighting invisible battles inside his own head. A man who has spent years becoming someone admirable while still carrying the identity of someone overlooked. That conflict creates a strange tension. Because people respond not only to who you are, but to who you believe you are. Let me paint a picture. Imagine a woman who has spent months observing you, not in some dramatic way, just naturally. Conversations, moments, small interactions. She's noticed how you handle pressure, how you speak to people when you gain nothing from it, how you react when things don't go your way. She's paying attention to details most men assume nobody sees. And slowly, without announcing it, she's building an impression, an emotional profile, a sense of your character. Then one day she takes a risk. Maybe it's subtle, maybe it's simply making herself more available, maybe it's asking a more personal question, maybe it's looking at you with a level of warmth that goes beyond ordinary friendliness. And what happens? Instead of meeting her halfway, you retreat. Not physically, emotionally. You start second-guessing everything. You become careful, overly careful. Every word gets filtered, every interaction gets analyzed. You stop being the man she connected with and become the man trying not to make a mistake. And ironically, that's often the moment she feels the greatest distance. Because confidence isn't perfection. Confidence is consistency. It's knowing who you are even when uncertainty enters the room. Women are often far more perceptive about this than men realize. Not because they're mind readers, but because human beings are remarkably good at sensing emotional contradictions. When your words say one thing but your energy says another, people notice, especially someone who's emotionally invested. I've had conversations with women who described this feeling without even realizing what they were describing. They'd say things like, "There's something about him I can't figure out," or "I feel like he's holding back," or "I don't think he sees himself the way everyone else sees him." And every time I heard those words, I knew what was happening. They weren't losing attraction, they were encountering a wall built from old beliefs, old wounds, old fears, the kind that quietly convince a man that being wanted is somehow less believable than being rejected. Think about that for a moment. How many men are prepared for disappointment? Almost all of them. How many are prepared for genuine interest? Far fewer. Because disappointment feels familiar. Interest feels vulnerable. Interest creates responsibility. If she actually likes you, now you have to face the possibility of being seen, really seen. And that's terrifying. Because being seen means your excuses start losing power. You can no longer hide behind assumptions. You can no longer tell yourself the outcome was impossible. Now the possibility exists. And possibilities are dangerous. They force you to choose, to risk, to step forward without certainty. This is why some of the most meaningful connections never begin. Not because attraction wasn't there, not because circumstances were impossible, but because one person couldn't believe what the other person had already discovered. And here's the irony. The very qualities that drew her toward you in the first place, your steadiness, your perspective, your emotional depth, your experience, can disappear the moment you stop trusting them. The moment you start performing instead of simply being. The moment you stop standing in your own reality and start viewing yourself through the eyes of imagined critics. That's when the connection starts slipping away. Not because she's changed her mind, but because she can no longer find the man she originally felt drawn toward. And what many women do at that point is something men often misunderstand completely. They don't always pull away because their feelings disappeared. Sometimes, they pull away because they got tired of waiting for you to believe them. That sentence stings a little, doesn't it? Because most men assume that if a woman is interested enough, she'll keep trying. She'll make it obvious. She'll remove all uncertainty. She'll somehow push through every wall until he finally understands. But human beings don't work that way, not for long. At some point, even the most patient person begins protecting their dignity, and that's where a lot of men get the story wrong. Years later, they'll look back and say, "I don't think she was ever interested." When the truth might be far more painful. She was interested, she simply stopped reaching, stopped signaling, stopped hoping. Not because she didn't care, because she cared enough to realize she couldn't carry the entire connection by herself. I've listened to women describe moments like this, moments they never shared with the man involved, moments that lived only in their own minds, a conversation they replayed for weeks, a glance they remembered long after it happened, a chance they almost took, a message they typed and deleted. a feeling they quietly buried. And what struck me every time was how invisible these moments were. The man usually had no idea. He thought nothing significant had happened. Meanwhile, she had been wrestling with emotions he never saw. That's one of the great misunderstandings between men and women. Men often look for clear events. Women often remember emotional experiences. A man remembers what happened. A woman remembers how it felt. And feelings create decisions long before words do. That's why attraction can look so mysterious from the outside. Because by the time visible evidence appears, an invisible process has often been unfolding for weeks or months. She's already been asking herself questions. How do I feel around him? Do I trust him? Does he make me feel understood? Do I feel calmer or more anxious after spending time with him? Can I imagine letting him see parts of me that most people never see? Those questions matter, far more than many men realize. Because while physical attraction may spark attention, emotional experience determines direction. And this becomes especially important when there's a significant age difference. Why? Because age creates scrutiny, not just from other people, from the individuals involved. A younger woman usually isn't evaluating an older man casually, she's evaluating him carefully. The stakes feel higher, the questions feel bigger, which means superficial qualities lose value surprisingly fast. Charm fades, image fades, status fades. What remains is character, consistency, integrity, the feeling she experiences when she's around you. That's why some relationships surprise everyone. Observers focus on the age gap. The people inside the connection focus on something completely different. The way they feel together, the ease, the trust, the sense of being understood. Things that don't fit neatly into statistics or assumptions. And yet, despite all this, many men continue fighting the wrong battle. They spend enormous energy worrying about whether she's too young, whether people will judge, whether the numbers make sense, while ignoring the only question that truly matters. How does she experience you? Not your resume, not your age, not your fears, you, the actual person standing in front of her. Because attraction rarely survives on potential alone, it survives on experience. And experience is created moment by moment, in conversations, in honesty, in emotional presence, in the willingness to show up as yourself instead of hiding behind protective masks. The sad thing is that fear often disguises itself as wisdom. A man tells himself he's being realistic, practical, responsible, but sometimes he's simply afraid. Afraid of hoping, afraid of being wrong, afraid of wanting something meaningful and discovering it won't work. That's understandable, completely understandable. But fear has a cost, and one of the highest costs is missed connection. Not rejection, missed connection. Because rejection at least gives you an answer. Missed connection leaves you with questions. Questions that can follow a man for years. Questions that appear unexpectedly in quiet moments. Questions that sound like this. What if I was wrong? What if she really did care? What if I talked myself out of something that was actually possible? And those questions, those are often much harder to live with than the truth itself. Because while disappointment eventually fades, unlived possibilities have a way of lingering. Especially when somewhere deep down, you suspect the door was open longer than you realized. So let me leave you with something that may stay with you long after this video ends. Not a strategy, not a technique, just an observation. One that took me years of listening to people, watching relationships unfold, and paying attention to the quiet truths hidden beneath what people say. The most important moments in our lives rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive carrying signs. They don't tell us, pay attention, this will matter. They often look ordinary. A conversation, a shared laugh, an unexpected sense of ease. A person who somehow occupies more space in your thoughts than logic can explain. And because those moments look ordinary, we often underestimate them. We assume there will be another chance, another conversation, another opportunity, another day. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. That's why I think so many men misunderstand what it means when a woman has already made a decision in her own heart. It doesn't mean she's planned the future. It doesn't mean she's certain about every outcome. Human beings are rarely that certain. What it means is something much simpler. She's stopped asking whether she's interested. and started wondering what happens next. That's a very different place emotionally, because curiosity creates attention, but emotional investment creates intention, and intention changes everything. When a woman reaches that point, she's no longer studying possibilities from a distance. She's paying attention to reality, watching, listening, learning who you actually are, not the fantasy version, not the idealized version, the real version. The way you handle uncertainty, the way you treat people, the way you respond when life becomes difficult, the way you carry yourself when nobody is applauding. Those things matter because attraction deepens through evidence, not promises, evidence. The evidence of character, the evidence of emotional stability, the evidence that the person she feels drawn toward is real. And maybe that's the part I wish more men understood. You don't have to become extraordinary to be deeply attractive. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to compete with younger men by pretending you're younger. In fact, that's often where men lose themselves. The goal was never to erase the years. The years are part of the story. Every lesson, every mistake, every heartbreak, every disappointment you survived, every moment that taught you who you are. The right person doesn't only see those years. She sees what those years created, and that's a completely different thing. Now, does that mean every younger woman who smiles at you is secretly interested? Of course not. Life isn't that simple. People are complex. Attraction is complex. Relationships are complex. But it does mean something important. You should stop assuming the answer before the question has even been asked. Stop writing endings to stories that haven't happened yet. Stop rejecting yourself on behalf of other people. Because the older I get, the more convinced I become that confidence isn't believing you'll always be chosen. Confidence is allowing yourself to be seen without deciding your worth based on the outcome. That's real confidence. And strangely enough, it's also the quality that makes a person unforgettable. So if there's a woman in your life right now, a woman whose attention feels different, whose presence lingers in your thoughts longer than you'd like to admit, a woman who seems genuinely interested in the man beneath the surface, don't rush to create explanations for why it can't be real. Just be present, pay attention, stay honest. Let reality reveal itself before fear does. Because sometimes the thing you've spent years believing is impossible is standing right in front of you. Not asking you to be younger, not asking you to be perfect, not asking you to become someone else. Just asking one simple question. Can you believe you're worth choosing? And if you can answer that question honestly, you may discover that the age difference was never the most important part of the story. It was simply the detail that distracted you from seeing what was there all along. And maybe tonight, after this video ends and the room becomes quiet again, you'll sit with that thought for a moment. Not wondering whether she could choose you, but wondering whether you've finally become willing to choose yourself. Because that's where every meaningful connection begins. Not with certainty, not with guarantees, but with the courage to stop arguing with the possibility that you are, and always have been, far more valuable than you allowed yourself to believe.